From September 1968 until March 1970, a series of brutal murders, often referred to as the Chilobwe Murders, occurred in the suburbs of Blantyre, a city in the southern African nation of Malawi. In all, at least 31 people died during the Reign of Terror. Despite 2 trials relating to it, the case is wrapped in mystery to this day. Malawi, previously known as Nyasaland, and nicknamed the Warm Heart of Africa due to the friendliness of the people, was part of the British Empire until it became independent on the 6th of July 1964. Due to being under the control of Britain for decades, the legal system was based on 19th century British common law. Information on what really happened is difficult to come by. Articles appeared in the local newspapers, but little was reported outside of Africa. The main source of information on the case for most of the world comes from the writings of Professor Paul H. Britsky. Britsky was a Chicago-born academic who taught law at the University of Malawi for a time and became interested in the case and how it helped to shape the Malawian law system. It is not known if this was one series of crimes linked by a single perpetrator or group of people. There are indications that at least some of the crimes may have been different from the others. There may have been many individual crimes lumped together. The crimes terrified the population and even led to a major upheaval of the legal system. Rumours abounded about the murders. One was that the government was responsible. Stealing the blood from the victims to send to South Africa to repay a loan was particularly popular. The crimes involved the killer or killers breaking into the homes of the victims, who were often poorer people, at night. The homes did not have much in the way of barriers to keep invaders out. Doors with simple locks and windows easily opened provided little protection. Once inside, the residents would be subjected to attack with an axe and a chisel and other implements. Known victims include a man named Buller, his wife, 2 children and his brother-in-law, killed in one rampage. Mrs. Chatter, area chairwoman of the League of Malawi Women, a happily married woman respected in the community, was savagely raped and murdered. She had been battered about the head with an axe, and her head and stomach mutilated with a sharpened bicycle spoke and a knife. Beside her were found some letters containing bizarre statements, including a slander against the victim, and an apparent attempt to foment civil strife by claiming the killers were members of the ruling political party. One of these read in part, "The deceased was a prostitute who swindled money belonging to the murderer. 4 of us have gone. Anyone married to a prostitute should please divorce her with immediate effect just now, because we are going to shoot with guns. Anyone who knows that this particular lady is my wife should please love each other wholeheartedly. Thank you. We are members of Malawi Congress Party, Youth and Malawi Police." In another incident, a man named Tarn and his wife were slain. Their child told police a man killed them and stole a radio. In another case, a man and his wife were slain. The man's penis was severed and inserted in his wife's vagina after death. 23 people had died by the 7th of January 1970, when that night 9 further people were attacked in 5 houses in the suburb of Nidarandi. The victims were a married couple with 2 young children, another married couple, and 3 single men. A child in one of the houses was left unharmed. It is unclear how many of the victims died in this assault, but it was reported that 5 were still unconscious the following day. It was claimed that this attack followed the pattern of the attack falling on every 7th night for 14 months. This aspect of the case was not explicitly mentioned in other sources. However, the event which led to the arrest of a suspect did take place on the 7th of March 1970. A man seen attempting to break into a house on that night was arrested and later put on trial. The first trial relating to the Axe Murders had taken place in 1969, known as the Nakalenga case, after one of the 5 defendants. These 5 people, it was alleged, had entered a house and brutally killed a man and a woman, and seriously injured a second man, whose name was Austin. Although Austin claimed initially that he could not identify the assailants, he changed his mind 11 days later, and even claimed that he had told the police who they were before that. Austin was not the only witness whose evidence was less than reliable, and Justice Bolt of the High Court ruled that though there was some evidence against the five, it was so unreliable that a reasonable jury would not convict on that basis. The case was not proceeded with, although the five remained in detention for a time. Parliamentary reaction to this finding was swift. A distinct difference in how British law viewed innocence and the way that African custom viewed it was starkly highlighted. One politician complained that many criminals were being let go free for the mere reason that there was not sufficient evidence to prove guilt. Another parliamentarian claimed that European lawyers and judges could not understand cases that involved witchcraft and superstition. The law was quickly changed. The local courts became traditional courts, where African standards of guilt, not European, would be enforced. The role of lawyers in court was basically terminated, and the right of appeal to the High Court abolished. 2 weeks later, the judges of the High Court all resigned, stating that the changes would not adequately safeguard justice to a British standard. It was noted that the changes were not done for the political expediency of the ruling party, but that the people of Malawi desired the change back to pre-colonial ways. On the 7th of March 1970, a prowler with a flashlight was disturbed and ran off when shouted at, leaving behind an apron, shirt and cap worn by employees of a local bakery. Police fingerprinted the workers and found they belonged to a man aged about 25, named Walla Laini Kawisa. Kawisa had come to Blantyre from a rural area north of the capital city Zomba in 1965. Kawisa appears to have had difficulty fitting into society. Although he married twice, both marriages were unsuccessful. His first became pregnant to another man, and the second marriage lasted for only a few months. Kawisa found it hard to form friendships and was often unemployed. In 1966, his uncle and a cousin came and tattooed him in a magic ritual. He was told to touch his genitals while reciting an incantation, as his cousin cut his body with a razor and inserted a black soft mixture into the cut to create the tattoo effect. During his trial, Kawisa claimed this was to help him acquire a job, but was more likely to be a spell to ward off impotence. It is said he claimed the tattooing made him so wild he could not resist the temptation to murder. Kawisa was kept in custody for 19 months before his trial, during which time he made 3 different confessions to police. In the traditional court system, which was now instituted, a confession was considered the most solid piece of evidence. In his first confession, he claimed that he was one of a group of 13 participants who had been paid to commit the murders at the behest of an exiled politician called Chilobwe, who had fled the country in 1964 and who wished to stir up chaos and political unrest. There were, he said, 3 cabinet ministers who would protect members of the group if they were caught. He had been recruited by Chilobwe, a local grocer whose shop he patronised, and local chairman of the Malawi Congress Party, who trained them to find and enter houses, use sorcery to put the victims to sleep, then to kill them, and to overcome the revulsion they felt at what they did. Kawisa then made a second confession, in which he was the main participant in a group of 4 who carried out the crimes, aided by 2 others who helped plan the killings. Finally, he provided a third confession, in which he claimed he acted alone. He had only given the other 2 confessions because police were demanding names of accomplices, he said. He named the others because they had been defendants in the Nakalenga trial, and others because they were fellow employees at the bakery. His final confession also removed any political element. He had heard the names of the politicians on the radio, he said, and had never expected to be paid by anyone, did not use sorcery, or medicine as he termed it, to put anyone to sleep, and it was not done to cause social unrest. All of the murders were referred to in similar ways in the confession. Kawisa would sneak up to a window, check who was inside, and then decide to attack or not. The clarity of the statements in his confession contrasts with the somewhat incoherent way he spoke in court, so how accurate such details are is open to question. Police claimed that a thumbprint on the letters found near the body of Mrs. Chatter matched Kawisa, that a radio stolen from Tarn was the same radio, and a bloodied axe also found in Kawisa's home, although it apparently lacked any of his fingerprints. Other than that, Kawisa was convicted on the basis of all three unreliable and conflicting confessions of 31 murders and 15 attempted murders. The judge, Chief Chikumbu, found he had acted alone and applied the mandatory sentence of death for murder. As Kawisa had pled guilty, he was not entitled to appeal his sentence. There was consternation that he was found to have acted alone, many believing he was part of a murderous gang. For one thing, Kawisa could not drive a vehicle, yet murders were committed up to 7 miles apart on the same night. Also, the sheer number of victims attacked at one time would have on occasion been almost impossible for one person to control. Chief Chikumbu found his Range Rover blocked by protesters laying on the road when he tried to leave court, and when he returned home to Mulanje, he was beaten up. The traditional court discussed an appeal, but found that Kawisa was guilty, although they found that he had not acted alone. If there were others who took part, they were never found out. The Malawian government never officially announced what happened to Kawisa, but it is all but certain that he was executed at Zomba prison during June 1972. Kawisa's personality, his impotence, lack of friends, and bouts of unemployment may have led him to commit some or all of these crimes. These were also traits that those seeking disposable operatives for illegal political activity seek. Whether he was responsible in any capacity, the killings did appear to cease after he was taken into custody. Robberies involving such brutality have occurred since, which obviously Kawisa or anyone else possibly involved in the late 1960s murders had any part in. On the 27th of August 2015, an elderly couple named Lefati and Nagareta Banda, aged 79 and 84, were found in their home in Mitundu, hacked to death with cuts all over their bodies from an axe and a hammer, which were left beside the bodies. Despite Kawisa being found guilty, so much was left vague, unknown and contradictory. The truth lost forever in the dark corners of history.